I'm currently dealing with a situation right now where they wanted to let go, and again, this is slightly more employer law, where they wanted to demote a current employee, and she's not accepting the demotion. And when I spoke to them, I'm representing her currently, and she wants to just negotiate an exit. They're like, well, she could just resign, and I'm like, no, she can't. She doesn't want to. She's just denying the demotion. Sometimes employers, to them, that's the most convenient thing, right? Yeah, you can resign, but that's because they don't want them to apply for unemployment benefits. They don't realize there can be real effects for an employee to resign. You're cutting off some benefits for them, and why should an employee take that risk? It's not worth it for them, especially.
So
Go ahead.
so let's I'm always like, okay, let's say that the employer gets what they want, right? And they get this employee to resign. What happens next?
Well, I mean, it's pretty straightforward, unless like they can say that they're induced and there's pressure for them to resign. Listen, as when I used to work HR at my employer, yes, it is definitely a safer bet for an employee to resign, because they effectively means that they've cut off liability, or they've accepted the fact that this is not a good fit for them.
Well,
Did I ever pressure an employee? No, but I think ultimately, now, if my goal as an employer is I don't want them to collect unemployment, and I put pressure on them to resign because I don't want them to collect unemployment, or I don't want to give them some kind of benefit, that's problematic, and that could be almost leaning towards fraud, because you're not putting a lot of pressure, unnecessary pressure on an employee.
so let's talk about that. Let's talk about what does undue pressure mean. Let's say your employee. Let's say your employee, the employer that you're working with.
Well,
He told you you could either take the demotion or you resign.
well,
Right?
yeah, that's actually what we're dealing with right now. So they found out that they were told at the beginning of the day, by end of day, you have to let us know if you're going to accept the demotion.
Right.
And then they get a call after hours saying we need to know by midnight. That's by any standard, and I'm like, thank God they texted that. I'm like, that's just great. That's just give me documentation. That's undue pressure.
So that's a definition of undue.
Is like really just being unreasonable, right? It's like it's basically saying my way or the highway. Listen, termination. If you're terminating someone, or layoffs, they're one way. But if you're trying to get someone to resign, it's supposed to be interactive. Ideally, I don't want to say interactive, but it should be interaction between two parties, right? When you want someone to do something that they don't want to do, then there's a problem here. If you are really insisting that that's the only way they can do the thing, to me, that's problematic.
Now, let's say that they go ahead and terminate the employee because they say she's not a good fit. She's not able to complete. She's not able to do the job that we asked her to do. They terminate.
Well, what's the documentation? Show me your documentation. Are they a crappy employee? What are the performance reviews? It comes back to the same thing, like you mentioned again. It's repetitive, but it's so important. What do you have in writing? Not orally, not on the phone, not what I told them on the desk when I stopped by their cubicle. What did you tell that person in writing?
So there's a disciplinary action.
Yeah. What did you tell them to fix? Did you give them guidelines? Did you give them training, like Jennifer would say? Like, have you given them the tools to improve? And did you work with them? And if you did, then yeah, then you should be solid. Then you shouldn't have to worry about a demand letter of any sort.
And to me, this does not sound like just a CYA action, right? This is not just about protecting yourself. It's just also thinking about just good practices for people in general. Dealing with people, you got to give the people the opportunity to see what they're doing wrong and give them a path towards doing what they need to do, right? And providing them those opportunities.
Right, like I'm sorry. So there is a cost, right? Every time I let go of a new employee, I put on a new employee. Isn't there a cost that ends up being a little bit more expensive, right? Because if I'm cycling through people so quickly, at some point,
training cost, hiring, you go through a hiring process. That's time, and that's all time that you spent that you've already invested in this person for you to turn around and then let them go. But then you got to check yourself, right? Did I take them through the process? Are they really doing something wrong that they don't know better? Maybe I haven't explained it to them, right? Have I shown them how to do it correctly and then given them the opportunity to do it correctly? Or am I telling them, no, do it again. No, do it again. That's not really helping anybody, right? So
transitioning into another topic because we kind of started out talking about, well, we did start out talking about accommodation, but now it's more about are we being fair to employees in their understanding what their work duties are, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, listen, I know sometimes it makes it sound like employers have to bear the brunt of this, but ultimately they have to set themselves to win, because if an employee is well educated and is trained, as I think Jennifer, you mentioned before, if I'm offering the right training, I really, hopefully, as an employer, I definitely want to avoid getting claims, you know. But if I do have a claim, I want to make sure I have the right protocols in place. I'm not always going to get them right. I'm not going to, but if I have the right, at least the basics down, like if I have the right workers' comp insurance, I at least have done the basic training to say, hey, take the claim, make sure that the person is treated, and make sure we can accommodate. I think more often than not, I think that should cover almost a lot of the businesses that I've dealt with as clients.